わいせつ行為を陳列した罪で斬首だ。
やってることが押しかけ事件だとか。
Oh, great. It's a representation of the PTO. You know it's because of guys like you that we ended up losing out on swimsuit episodes. We opened this week with Idra and Togo returning from yet another successful quest, aside from the fact that our resident Red ended up blowing up their dropped items again. Thus, he was unable to afford his own room and board, forcing him to live in Idra's mansion. The lady of the house herself was fine with this, as she could also use this opportunity to teach him more about the workings of this world, but the butler, Poseidon, who claimed that he saw her like a granddaughter, was against this. Well, he is named after a Greek god, so, you know. With that, he decided to go full scissor man on Togo to trim some, branches, but Idra stopped him. All the while, some visitors were ringing their doorbell before letting themselves in. Of course, they were the pair from the end of the last episode. The priestess-looking girl introduced herself as Princess Teltina of the Avalost Empire, though every time I hear her voice, I swear she sounds more like an Egyptian pharaoh. She is traveling with her overly loyal knight Logi, yeah, we'll get to him in just a bit, and they want to hire Idra to research and help them track down the evil MacGuffins of the series, the Monosiege, which of course was the thing that was in the bald dude's head from the last episode. What did you do to him? Oh, you know, we just took this little metal rod and stuck it right up his nose a little, and it's by posing like she was trying to sell to them through an infomercial, she did acknowledge that these things were very dangerous. As while they could grant anyone's deepest, darkest desires like developing a Midas touch or an invisible barrier, everything came at a price, with our protagonist already having encountered and fought the resulting beast of it. Of course, such items should have been outlawed, but the current ruling family were the ones who usurped Idra's and were even cooperating with other royalty to essentially run, well, let's call it a dark treats cartel. And of course, since they already look like Super Sentai villains, they may as well act like them and create a bunch of monsters of the week. Though actually turning people is a bit more of a magical girl thing, but close enough. Plus Precure hasn't done it in a hot minute. Of course, Idra absolutely wanted in on this for her own selfish purposes of getting back at the usurpers and even scoring some points with the lowly princess. That said, such royalty would have some very particular knights surrounding them. Also, wouldn't Idra count as an additional traveling companion? Or are you just looking to have a threesome? Because that would be super based. But yeah, he challenged Togo to a duel to decide whether or not he could join them in their quest. Interestingly enough, they even found a canyon that looked like...
This is that rock quarry in Ibaragi that they used to film those tokusatsu shows, isn't it?
Teltina went on to explain how Logi was basically an endgame JRPG protagonist, complete with a weapon that had previously defeated the Demon Queen. However, game, or really any sort of logic, didn't exactly apply to Togo. I guess some people just aren't fans of tokusatsu or Michael Bay films. Yeah, I'll say right now, Logi really wasn't winning me over, even by the end of this episode, with him just being overly dismissive of Togo and overly protective of the princess. Conversely, I actually kind of love said princess, as Teltina was pretty much the first person in this whole world who was immediately infatuated by all the Sentai-isms. It was both adorable and pretty damn hilarious, especially when she is paired up with the cynical Idra. Anyway, during the battle, Logi powered up his sword, so Togo decided to do likewise, which made me think he was going to act as some sort of super form, like not Battleizer, as that's more of an American thing, for the most part, but maybe like 119, or SWAT, or... Zordon's words went in one ear and out the other for you, didn't it? Also, you're totally stealing Zen Kaiser's famous catchphrase, which he kind of stole from Nanoha. Yeah, you see what I mean when all this stuff is kind of connected? But yeah, as admittedly hilarious as this whole situation was, another reason you don't actually want to break out the giant mech is because it just makes you a much bigger target and you have to deal with a much smaller human-sized enemy. Really, Tommy/Bri just kind of screwed themselves over when they made some very predictable attacks. Though, same kind of applied to Logi when he jumped up to the mech's level, where the air was a lot thinner and more fannable. Fortunately, he somehow survived being blown a football field away and was forced to acknowledge Togo as their teammate, if only to make sure that their big robot couldn't cause any more damage. The latter point, by the way, was convinced him by Taltina, who again, I'm really liking because she's also clearly a good diplomat. With that, the four set off on their quest after Poseidon told Togo to keep his Kizna blade in his pants. The Red Sentai also had to deal with the dude who is pretty much just a stand-in for your typical Blue. Granted, based on the flashback so far, his original Blue was a little bit more on the brainy side, while this guy was a loudmouth hothead. Oh, don't worry dude, I know of the perfect nickname for you. Simps! The first stop on their quest led them to a supposedly hustling and bustling town, but I guess they were in the middle of some lockdowns, though not so much for a fairly overblown flu virus, but more because they were living in fear, as this random exposition lady explained. The lore of the town had somehow established a draconian rule by means of a magic barrier that, while protecting the town, also acted as just one big surveillance camera. Thus, he would be aware of any lawbreakers, like those he would consider to be committing defamation on him. I would make a 1984 joke here, but let's be honest, we're all living in 1984 right now. Anyway, this led to Taltina having another really good moment where she tried to use her royal position to order the Lord to release his grip on the people, showing really how passionate she was about maintaining proper order and peace, and damn it, I'm also turning into this dude, aren't I? But yeah, with one of his more proper speeches, Togo backed her up by saying that no proper bonds could be formed if the people constantly lived in fear like this. Social influencers in a nutshell. Togo of course tried to fight against his familiars, that on top of the Lord being able to make them appear and disappear at will, he could also use his barrier to keep track of all of the Red's movements and strike him in all of his blind spots, effectively making him an invincible enemy. Of course, Logi could have gone into hell, but...
You suck!
With that, the episode ended on a good cliffhanger with Togo about to take seemingly a death blow from one of the familiars. This episode had some really good world building and the introduction of one good new character. Yeah, as legit endearing and amiable as Taltina has been so far, Logi has been mostly an antagonistic putz. Hopefully he does go through some development, but at the very least, now Idra does have some competition for best girl in the show. After a couple of episodes that focused a little more on the Isekai adjusting to the Sentai, I guess it would make sense that we'd get an episode where the world would take a little more center stage. Thankfully, they did it in a way that didn't inhibit Togo and his bombastic tactics, like summoning a Megazord out of nowhere to deal with one guy, but I do like how this episode did build up some good political intrigue that even nicely tied in with Idra's conflict. It helps to make the world feel a little bigger, and of course gives our protagonist a proper goal to strive for. Said protagonist got one new good addition to their team in Taltina, who, yeah, is cute, especially when she marked out over Togo's Sentai stuff, but also did have a rather commanding presence, especially for someone of her size. It makes her feel like a proper noble with some very amiable intentions that line up nicely with the Red's ideals. Conversely, Logi is the lowest in terms of likability for me. I mean, I get that Red often does need a blue rival that's kind of a tale as old as time, but aside from that, so far, he seems like he's just there for his princess's sake, whilst not really actively showing any interest in dealing with the monoseeds beyond the fact that Taltina wants them to be exposed of. Hopefully, my opinion on him will change over time, but even if it doesn't, at least his master is pretty great. And overall, this was a pretty good episode where they did slow things down a little to build the world and introduce these new characters. Hopefully, we'll be able to continue to enjoy the show much like Taltina and not be like a Sir Simpington. Thank you for watching, and unlike a certain Blue Knight, we do appreciate any and all feedback, whether it be positive or negative for this channel. It took a little adjusting, but I think we've gotten into the groove of the season schedule, and we'll probably stick to it, unless a new series shows a little promise, but we'll see. And until next time though, farewell for now my friends, and yeah, I should probably clean this.